Hey, fantastic fourth graders. So today, our I can statement is, and please read with me, I am learning to fluently subtract multi digit whole numbers across zeros. So, our big skill today, yesterday we practiced all about subtracting. Today, we're going to make sure that we're just focusing on subtracting across zeros. So, we're going to watch a quick YouTube video together. All right. So that was our quick little video on how to subtract across zeros using the long method. Today, we're going to show you a little zeros hint. So if you need to subtract across zeros like we have on our screen, we're going to come all the way over to the 2 and borrow. If we know we're going to have to borrow from those two middle zeros, then we are going to leave those as nines at the top after we borrow instead of telling us that we're 10 and then marking it out and writing a 9 and then going to a 10 and marking it out and writing a 9. We're just really going to shorten that experience. So this is an example of what we're talking about here. Now, I want you to get out your whiteboard and we're going to practice how we would just regroup this. So we're not even going to do the subtraction. We're going to figure out what this would look like as a regrouping. So we know that we are going to need to turn all of these zeros into a larger number. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to mark out all of these digits because we are going to need to borrow. So we've borrowed from the 7. We're going to have to borrow from each of these zeros all the way down until we get to the last 0. So I have all of my zeros marked out and my 7 marked out. I am ready to regroup. So up here, I'm going to make my text box just so I can type it easy. That 7 is going to turn into a 6 because we're borrowing from it. That 0 is going to turn into, it would be a 10, but we're going to need to borrow from it again, so it's going to turn into a 9. And then this 0 is also going to turn into a 9 because we're going to have to borrow from it. And then our other sandwich 0 is going to turn into a 9. But our last 0 up here is going to turn into a 10. So if your board looks like mine, it means that you did it. You regrouped across zeros. So you should have the 7 turning into a 6, the 3 zeros in the middle turning into a 9, and the last 0 on the end in the ones place turning into a 10. So we're going to go down here to our next one. This one, we're going to whiteboard practice regrouping and finding the difference. So we know we're going to need to borrow for all of these numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and mark out all of my numbers because I know I'm going to need to borrow from each one. And I'm going to need to go ahead and make my text box up here, which you all will just be writing to create my numbers. So that 3 is going to turn into a 2 because I'm borrowing from it. This next one would turn into a 10, but since I'm borrowing from it, it's going to be a 9. And then another 9. And then lastly, a 10. Once I've done all of my regrouping, I can come down here and I can solve. So we always want to start over here, which is a little bit awkward on a computer. So this 10 minus 9 is a 1. And then we have 9 minus 9, which is a 0. And then we have 9 minus 8, which is 1. And lastly, we have 2 minus 1, which is 1. So you should have gotten an answer of 1,101. Here we are going to do one more practice problem. So we are going to need to borrow. Now, with this problem, we can go ahead and look ahead. We aren't going to need to borrow anything from the number in the 10,000s place because 8 is larger than 7. And even after we regroup, you can take 7 away from 7. So we are going to go ahead and cross out the numbers that we are going to need to regroup. And go ahead and regroup those numbers. That 8 is going to turn into a 7. This 0 is going to turn into a 9. The next sandwich 0 is going to turn into a 9. And then our ones place 0 is going to turn into a 10. So then if we come down here, we can go ahead and find our difference. So we have 10 minus 9, which is 1. We have 9 minus 5, which is 4. We have 9 minus 2, which is 7. We have 7 minus 7, which is 0. And then last but not least, we have 2 minus 1, which is 1. So you should have gotten 10,741. So that is subtracting across zeros. What I want you to do now is I want you to go to do your math exit slip. So you're going to go to your Google Classroom, you're going to go to today's date, you're going to find the math exit slip, and you're going to show us how great of a job you could do subtracting across zeros.